Americans and the rest of the world are waiting anxiously as the state of Pennsylvania finalizes the ballot count. It is literally neck and neck in the presidential race for the White House. Joining us now from Philadelphia in Pennsylvania is Voice of America correspondent Esha Sarai, who has been covering the vote count in the state, currently being referred to as the deciding state. Esha, thank you for your time and thank you for joining us. It seems that tensions are running high as Pennsylvania continues to count the ballots. What is the situation there right now?
Yes, so in Pennsylvania, votes are being counted in the city of Philadelphia, as you said, in the Pennsylvania Convention Center downtown. And the Trump administration has pushed for monitors from the administration to be allowed in and watch the counting of ballots. The city of Philadelphia denied this request. And since that's happened, there have been some Trump supporters stationed outside the Pennsylvania Convention Center, demanding to be let in, saying that they're showing their support for President Trump. However, a lot of these people are from out of town, even out of state. While Pennsylvania is a key swing state, the city of Philadelphia itself tends to lean quite Democratic. So the city of Philadelphia has come out in response to these Trump supporters, holding what they call a block party instead of a demonstration across the street from the convention center. They're effectively facing off with the Trump supporters, though they have all been separated by police. It's heavily policed outside the center right now. And those Philadelphia residents are calling for every vote to be counted. They're saying that they're anxious for the result, but that they're willing to wait for all mail-in votes to be counted.
Aisha, has there been any signs that there will be protests spreading across other counties in Pennsylvania other than where we've seen them right now, with Trump supporters showing up onto the streets? And is an escalation of tensions on the streets?
It's hard to say. So far, what I've witnessed during the day in Philadelphia has been relatively calm, relatively peaceful. Like I said, it's a bit of a block party. There's music. There's a lot of dancing happening. But of course, that being said, last night, Philadelphia police foiled a plot to attack the convention center. They've apprehended 2 people who drove in from Virginia who had guns and who had ammunition and had plans to somehow attack the convention center. So far, we haven't seen any kind of attacks or violence being carried out, but there have been plans across the country that have been foiled by police.
The GOP sought an urgent court application last night asking for the segregation of ballots to continue the way it is, and the court said, yeah, just keep doing what we've been doing. Why is it important for post-election day ballots to remain segregated from mail-in ballots, pre-election day ballots, as well as on-day election ballots?
Yes. So the laws around mail-in ballots, when they're accepted and when they're counted, does vary by state. And so the state of Pennsylvania, which I should mention, this is the first year in Pennsylvania's history that they have allowed all residents to vote by mail, regardless of, if they had a reason or not, amid the coronavirus pandemic. So Pennsylvania decided that as long as votes were mailed, were postmarked, as we say, by Election Day on Tuesday, they could be counted up to 3 days afterwards. So that is up until Friday, which is today in the U.S. Now, the Trump administration challenged this ruling, and ultimately the Supreme Court voted in favor of Pennsylvania, and that's why mail-in votes are still being counted. The president has sowed a lot of distrust in the mail-in process. He's put out multiple allegations of fraud without any evidence to back it up. But because of this mistrust he's sowed, the supporters I mentioned outside the convention center have some doubts about the validity of these votes that are being counted. And one thing I think is also important to clarify is, a lot of Trump supporters and Trump himself has kind of been alluding to, stop the voting, as if to indicate that voting is still happening. But it's important to note that all votes that are being counted were cast by Election Day. There have been no extra votes that have been cast in this week since. It's just a matter of election officials counting all ballots that have been casted, which takes time.
Esha, we've heard of recounts in the likes of Georgia. Can we expect another recount in the state that you're in?
I can't say for sure what the Trump administration has said about a possible recount in Pennsylvania, but I can tell you that the Trump supporters that I spoke with outside the convention center today said that they are expecting a recount, even though we haven't finished the first count yet. So that's something that at least some Trump supporters are going to be pushing for, I imagine, if Biden ends up having victory in this state.
Recounts aren't things that happen overnight, and in many states, some of the regulations around recounts are that they should happen by hand after 10 days after the final, within 10 days after the final result has been out. How long should there be a recount? How long should we expect it to last?
Well, counting votes in the state of Pennsylvania has taken, now we're on day 4.
Wow.
I will say that part of that delay has been because, as I mentioned earlier, mail-in ballots are still coming in. So were there to be a recount, it would not take as long as this initial count took. I unfortunately don't have specifics on how many days, but I think we can expect, maximum 4 to 5 days and likely less than that.
Esha, now in terms of the Republicans and the Democrats and any tension that may have been spilling over on the streets, if you have to try and compare this tension this year versus the elections 4 years ago, it seems as though things are a lot more tenser and tighter this year than it was 4 years ago when Trump was voted into power.
Yeah, I think there's certainly a difference in that, many Democrats this year were hoping for what they called a blue wave. I think that a lot of Democrats, especially some that I've spoken with on the streets this year, really assumed that it was going to be a landslide for Biden. However, everyone has seen what happened in 2016. And so I think that in 2016, Democrats were extremely shocked by Trump's victory. But in this election, they've seen that he does carry a lot of support throughout the country. And so there's been tensions are a little heightened because Democrats know that this is a possibility and they're concerned about fighting for victory for Biden. But I think it's also worth noting that, the United States has seen a summer full of protests, largely around Black Lives Matter. And because there's a lot of rhetoric around voter suppression and disenfranchisement, a lot of the energy from the Black Lives Matter protests has been carried into the streets, like we're seeing today.
Should we expect any of the tension to escalate over time, given that Trump has a lot more support amongst minorities? Cuban Americans, Latin Americans, as well as African Americans voted in higher numbers for Trump this time around than they did the last time around, which seems counterintuitive given how long Black Lives Matter protests have been happening in the U.S. Should we expect any other tensions related to this escalate over the coming days?
I mean, I do think, as you've said, we're a little more aware this election cycle of the fact that Trump's support is not solely among white Americans. There's a really diverse range of people that supports him. And again, I can tell you that the people I've spoken with who support President Trump say that their primary concern is the economy. And that obviously the economy is something that transcends race and ethnicity. So you have a lot of people, and some of them are minorities, who say that their main concern is whether their taxes are going to remain low, and they credit President Trump with having lowered their taxes.
Esha, now, where to from now? What can we expect to come out of Pennsylvania in the next hour or so?
I'm not a Pennsylvania election official, but I will tell you that in the next hour, considering it's already 11 p.m. here, I don't know that we can expect very much. We were hoping for results by this evening. It doesn't look like that's going to happen, even though I believe something like 99% of the votes here have been counted. But we're definitely looking into seeing results over the weekend.
All right, the Voice of America correspondent, Esha Sarai, joining us, giving us an update on what's been going on in the state of Pennsylvania. A big thank you to you, Esha Sarai, for joining us. Oliver, it seems quite interesting there in Pennsylvania. Do you really think the tensions could spill over to racial separation regarding the Black Lives Matter movement, as you mentioned earlier?
Yeah, I mean, tons of black support coming out for Biden within Philadelphia, which is in Pennsylvania, right? And looking at the graphs here, I mean, Pittsburgh is entirely blue, Erie is entirely blue, Allentown is entirely blue, and the rest of Pennsylvania is red.
It's the red wave, the blue wave that you mentioned.
So it is going to be a close call. Because without Pennsylvania, Trump has no path to victory. None whatsoever. He needs Pennsylvania. But Pennsylvania might be concluded at a point where it's too late, because we might have a final result coming out of Georgia. We might have a final result coming out of Nevada. And Biden just needs one of those two for him to get over the 270 mark, and then it's a wrap.